Hey there, this is Dan. You're watching the Salty Sea, and Warcry is supposed to be fun, guys. So let's celebrate some fun guys. Honorable mentions: Marauders and Volkites have been disqualified for various sins against ugliness, whether it's just the weird faces, the lack of pants, who cares. Stone Guards, if we were really doing a top 10, Stone Guards would probably be my 10, but I really just wanted to talk about 8. Stone Guards are sweet, though, and they also have Wardens with them. I would say Stone Guards and Wardens kind of come hand in hand. You get this solid offensive output for 85 points. You get the speed and the reach for 65 points. Both of them have defensive abilities that can kind of mitigate the fragile nature of elves. There's a reason why, Lumineth is the only elf faction that is doing okay, and it's really because these guys are out there tangling with people without having to get too close to them, and that's really what's propping Lumineth up in the great elven wasteland that is Warcry 2.0. Now let's get into the pit fighters, and I wish I could have put them number 1 because this is a championship belt. They're the only ones who have actually fought for a championship belt. They are out there in the pits, in the gladiatorial arena, doing everything they can. You can pick nets or you can pick damage. You just take 3 of each. Honestly, the damage is only +1 crit, so I probably lean towards just going all nets all the time. But that 4 crit is pretty terrifying if you do it, and you probably don't need all nets always. Either way, pit fighters are extremely good. They're some of the best netters in the game, and Spire Tyrants are very scary because of them. Let's get into number 8, and that is the Huanchi's Claw. You'll see him in the ring, dancing around. I just got done saying that featherweights aren't known for their acrobatic feats in this edition. Well, for this guy, they really are. He is slipping out of people's reach. He is dancing around them. He is tossing spears at them from far away. I've got people's stats in here, but they're really just meant to compare melee fighters. They're not really meant for range. But his Vorf is still high even compared to everyone else because he's just got surprisingly good stats. That crit damage when you get to attack really 4 dice on an attack activation, because remember, he's not needing to run up to someone to slap them. 4 dice off this guy is pretty frightening. The ability to get the free disengage in between 2 attack actions is really nice, so you never have to end a round in combat with someone, which is great. I'm so impressed by all the people, of course off-meta musings being the one to sort of instigate this, but all the people who were actually willing when the whole Warcry community was looking at this box and saying, this is one of the worst factions in the game, but they do have one really good one. The people who were willing to actually convert up 75 of these guys is pretty incredible. He comes into the ring with a hype man. The hype man is a guy who, he's a terrible wrestler. He can't get involved in any kind of fight to save his life, but he's still there. He's still employed by the company because he's just there to tell you how great Huanchi's Claw is. And for them, that is the Chameleon Alpha. He just calls himself an alpha. He thinks he's watched too many weird bros on YouTube talk about how you need to self-prophesize. And so he just calls himself an alpha. He's pretty much a waste of time on the field, but he is there to tell you how good the Huanchi's Claw is. And in that case, he's not lying. You also might see the Huanchi's Claw rolling pretty deep with a lot of buddies, often with KO leaders. That 2-3-1-4 profile, when you've got 3 or 4 Huanchi's Claws in the fight for profit bubble of a KO leader, all of a sudden, if they're going 4-3-1-4 on each attack, that's actually pretty terrifying coming out of Huanchi's Claws. It's, every 6 just cuts you down a little bit. And so that's what the KO leaders do for them, and that's why you'll see them hanging out so often. Let's get into number 7. I've got a picture of Skragrott the Loon King here because so many folks see Prog as the unofficial king of Warcry. He certainly sees himself as the unofficial king of Warcry. His stats are not all that special. He won't do a lot of damage to you. he won't survive that many hits from you. But what he will do is toss a net over you. And he will do so at having 10 wounds instead of the 6 that a regular grot has, which means he can usually take a hit and still survive. His hype man is Zarbag. Zarbag tags along with him and is not good. That's okay. He's also rolling in pretty deep with a crew of destruction netters. They are one of the forces to be reckoned with in the game. Boggle-Eyes rolls up. Stabba with net rolls up. Shank is, of course, Shank thinks that he's the best of them all. He's not. He's not nearly charismatic enough to sort of be the main draw the way Prague is. But Shank is pretty good. His net works on a 2-up instead of a 3-up, which is really solid. But either way, this whole crew is putting fear into the hearts of many in Warcry, and it's all thanks to Prague because he is the coolest one. Mortek Guard are number 6 on the Featherweight list, and they are where we start to look at absurd stats. You can take them with Spear, or you can take them with Great Blade. I don't hate the sword ones. I just prefer the spear and the great blade. I think the sword ones are still fine and good. You get kind of a choice here whether you want the extra damage efficiency from the great blade having it's funny, they are only 2 attacks, but because it's 4/2/4 and only 50 points, having 4 or 5 great blades out there really starts to add up in terms of the damage that comes at you. And then, of course, the toughness 5 on the spears is truly incredible. So either way, they're really good. Form shield wall is another thing. These little guys, like any good featherweight wrestler, they know they have to be part of a team, and they are absolutely willing to sort of help out everybody around them. Their hype man is the Mortek Hekatos. That guy sucks. He's terrible, but you'll always see him in a group because he's the cheapest OBR leader. I think that there's some argument to be made for taking a Liege Cavalos in OBR. 270 is a lot of points, but he actually does something. Mortek Hekatos doesn't do anything. He's terrible. So anyway, you will see these guys rolling in deep with stalkers, usually 1 or 2 always. Sometimes you'll see an Archive. To be honest, the community hasn't really quite settled on the exact secret sauce for finishing an OBR list yet, but we just do know that they are very, very good. And if there's ever a really, really good death hero that pops up in maybe one of these new teams, we know that there's an OCR bespoke team coming out, a Nighthawk bespoke team coming out. These guys are always just like one crazy ally away from being very terrifying, though what they really need is a good OBR hero, and thankfully they don't have that. The Mortek Hekatos is all they've got. Let's get into number 5, which is Graveguard and Skeletons. They are the Bash Bros of the Featherweight division. Number 10 and number 9, which were Pit Fighters and Lumineth, they can't hold a candle to what Graveguard and Skeletons are doing. You've got the Graveguard at damage efficiency 11.5. He is the pound for pound slapping champion in the entire game. Tankiness, though, he's not actually very tanky. At 65 points, T3, 10 wounds, is not that durable, but still very, very good. I rate him at 8.3 on value over replacement fighter. And then the Skellington 9.0 damage efficiency is still very impressive, one of the highest around. And then his tankiness. I mean, 4.8 for just 40 points is absolutely absurd. Anytime you attack a skeleton and don't kill it in one hit, which will happen often because, they've got the toughness 4, so you really need a big hammer threat to do it. And sometimes you just don't roll an average roll and you just don't count to 8. So anytime you attack a skeleton and you don't take it out in one hit, you just feel like you've lost the game. And that's what they're for. They have a hype woman, the Vampire Lord. She's actually not that bad, but her and the Vargoyle do tend to be the leaders you see in Soulblight Gravelords. And Soulblight, a little bit like OCR, there's no leader that you're super thrilled with, but at least the Vampire Lord does something. She can slap people around. She can sort of mesmerize people with her crazy hair. She's got some strengths. You won't really see them rolling in deep with other friends just because they are each other's best friend. As I said, they're the Bash Bros. They've watched Mighty Ducks one too many times, and that's all there really is to say about them. Let's go into Shatterers, who are number 4 on our list. They are the weird farmers of Warcry. They have probably the best stats on this list. Damage efficiency 8. They really get stuff done. They've got that range 2 on their profile, 3314. Having crits do 4 damage on these super cheap fighters is just absolutely absurd. And then their tankiness, 5.8 is perfectly fine, and it's just because they're so cheap with 10 wounds. Again, 10 wounds for 55 points is just incredible. And so the fact that they can put a lot of damage out, reach to cover each other to make it so that a lot of them will be hitting the same things is really powerful. The reason they get to be so damage efficient is because they don't have any abilities. They don't have a faction reaction, but that's okay. All you need them to do is walk around and hit things, and they walk around really well. Nobody has move 4 and gets to hang out in the anywhere similar damage efficiency range that Shatterers get to hang out in, right? If you look back a few ways, those are all move 3. If you look forward, you might see a couple move 3 fighters. I don't know. So just the pure stats on the Shatterers, these are probably in terms of pure numbers efficiency, I would say Shatterers are the best unit in the game. Now, there's a lot more to Warcry than just numbers efficiency, but just on that, I would say Shatterers are number 1. Their hype man is the Ruinator Alpha. He is terrible. However, he has the Ash Bomb. He knows his job is to protect his little baby boys. He will throw that Ash Bomb down. It'll give -1 toughness so that sometimes the 3314s will be hitting on 4s. And it gives the -1 attack bubble so that these Shatterers can last a much longer time. All of a sudden, that toughness 310 wounds is starting to look a lot more intimidating when you have to grind through it with 1 less attack. You'll see these guys in a pretty consistent crew a lot of the time. You'll see them with a Demolisher with Flame Hurler. I have a feeling as this video series, as we go through the different weight classes, you might be hearing from the Flame Hurler later. And you'll also see them with the Crusher and the Myrmidon. Another couple guys you might see later someday. This is a pretty incredible crew. We're getting to the point now in this list where everybody at the top of the featherweight division, they run things in Warcry. They really, truly do. And so, Shatterers, they're not even the headliners in their own crew sometimes. That's how powerful Horns of Hashut get to be. And Shatterers are just like one part in what is such a well-oiled machine when you put it together, right? Now let's talk about number 3 on the featherweight list, and that is Plague Bearers. At the weigh-in, they have incredible efficiency at 8.8 and tankiness at 7.5. A Vorf of 8.4 is very good. Not as good as some of the other fighters on this list, but very, very good. What makes them so great, in my opinion, is actually their reaction impossible to wound gives them this sort of, and they're incredibly cheap at 50 points, but it gives them this way to be very flexible and very sort of skill testing to use without needing to be using dice at all, right? In terms of, and maybe it's not that skill testing, let's be honest. They can sort of move forward. They can do real damage. 3314 is a real profile that is legitimately scary over time. And when you need them on the defensive, if someone tries to prey on them early, you can use Impossible to Wound so that they stay alive a lot longer. Or you can do counter if they're coming at you with low strength and you want to flip damage back onto them. So they have this incredible flexibility where you can play them however you need to play them in the moment. And so the fact that they have that flexibility and they have incredibly high efficient stats, I think just makes them extremely good. They also benefit from not really needing a hype man. There's really no wasted space. The Plague Ridden is 90 points, but he doesn't suck as much as you would think people should suck at just like a 90-point leader. He's perfectly damage dealing. He's got 4 attacks. He does actual damage with his attacks. He's got 15 wounds. Or you can move up 40 points and You would think that going up 40 points shouldn't be a trade-off, but you actually get a lot for it, whether it's Sloppity Bilepiper to move these Plague Bearers around faster, or whether it's the Poxbringer to be a legitimate fighting piece with a Wizard Blast if you need it. Really 3 very good leaders that you'll see kind of in equal well, you don't see a lot of Poxbringers, but you should. That's my favorite leader for them. Dudes in their crew, they can play with anybody. That's what's so cool about them. But what you'll see the most often is a Varren Guard or a FOMO Crusher. Really a Varren Guard. FOMO Crushers are sort of the universal ally for Chaos, but I think with Nurgle, most people end up finding that the Varren Guard suits them better because Plague Bearers are so slow that you kind of want your biggest, fattest thing to be pretty fast, and so that's who's hanging out. But really, the Grandpa gives gifts, and anyone who wants to hang out with Plague Bearers is allowed to, and it'll work out perfectly fine. That is their biggest strength in the game. Now let's talk about Arkanauts. Arkanauts are the Boston Athletes of Warcry. They have so many rings. They weigh in kind of a funny way. So their pistol is 4.8 damage efficiency on the range. Of course, not going to be as high. Tanky though, 7.6. 12 wounds for 50 points is absurd. And the melee is legitimately pretty scary. 3-3-1-3 is not as good as what we've been seeing on this list, but being able to have that and a ranged profile and 12 wounds and only cost 50 points is so wild. The spear kind of gets to be a completely different round of attack. It becomes one of the highest damage pieces in the entire game, and it has range 2. The Vorf on the spear carrier is 9.22, which is pretty absurd. The Vorf seems low for the company, but that's when you consider that is their range of Vorf and their melee one. And so when you combine those, they're actually really incredible. This is why, all models are wrong, but some can be useful. My Vorf stat is the best stat that I've seen anyone come up with, but it is not perfect in every way. You do need to take it with the grain of salt that you would take everything with. One of the cool things about Arkanauts is, again, they have no hype man. There is no wasted space when you are running Arkanauts. All of the KO leaders are pretty good, but all of them rely on just being able to spend 250 points for 5 little dwarves that are annoyingly difficult to remove from the board. That is why, they have just been stacking tournament win upon tournament win. Bill and Tom would be proud. When you see them roll up, they will be showing with Aether Cannons, they will be showing with Arkanaut Admirals, they will be bringing Bloodrack Medusas, you might even see them with an Achillean King or a Stormcast Eternal Paladin leader, something like that. They have lots of options, but you'll pretty much always see them with at least one Aether Cannon in their crew, sort of jumping into some terrifying entrance music, because that is just what they do, and championships are just what they get. Now, the real belt goes to the Brugit. First of all, the very first weekend of Warcry 2.0, someone showed me a screenshot of myself with the 2 championship lists on the screen, and they were both Brugit destruction lists. And the Brugit has just been terrifying the world ever since. I think it is probably the most flexible model, right? There is no crew that Brugits roll up in. They roll in every single crew in the Gnarlwood is trying to get Brugits on their team. No matter where you are in destruction, there are people thinking about putting Brugits on their team, as they should. The stats are not particularly impressive, but they're not that embarrassing either when you consider that they have probably the best ability in the game. That ability is Loonshine Potion. You get to pick a friendly fighter, a little buddy within 3 inches, and until the end of the battle round, you get +3 attacks. Brugit is the guy who is handing out the chairs for the big boys to hit the other big boys with. He is the guy who breaks every sort of heavyweight on heavyweight mirror match, and for that reason, he is the featherweight champion of the world. He is just so impactful in every game you see him in. You rarely see more than 1, and you almost never see more than 2, just because, 1, he takes too long to paint 50 of him, and he's really expensive. But the other reason just being because of how the ally rules work, but you're still going to see him, and at 70 points, he will feel impactful in the way that a 200-point fighter does. And so that is why I'm giving him the championship belt. Yes, the Arkanauts are going to feel pretty hard done by with this result because they've got the championships, but I think it's the Brugit, and I do wonder if I added up all of the different destruction tournament wins, how many of them would have Brugits, and would that be as many as Kharadron Overlords has? I think it might be. I don't actually know, and I'm too lazy to go through those stats right now on a sort of fun wrestling show, but I'll do it another time. I'll come with more of this series in a minute, and until then, may all your rolls be crits.